how the data that is on the transparency platform gets there. And this whole process of messaging to the transparency platform will be covered by the data processing and later on by the warnings report. So how the data processing report, what it is based on is the data flow monitoring. I'm sure that if you're a data product or transparency platform, you are using that data flow monitoring backend of the transparency platform. This is where we basically log every single message that comes to the platform, see the status of the report, of the message, if it's rejected, if it's processed completely, and so on, and try to log as many information as possible for you to later on be able to debug any issues that might have led to the rejection of a certain message. The problem with this data flow monitoring is that so what is capable of is list what is delivered to the platform. So every single message is basically categorized for what is the data item that that message is containing, who is this message is coming from, exact timestamps when it was started processing, when it ended processing, and you can also dig down more deeper into the actual messages that came up by the server alongside the processing. So for example, warnings. On this data flow monitoring screen, what every single line is basically a single message sent to the transparency platform, and these messages have certain states, if they are rejected, if they are still waiting to be processed, so there is a key to enter the transparency platform, and so on. And you have a wide range of filters. You can filter based on the date, you can filter based on the channel, based on the state of a message, based on the sender's organization, or based on the data item that is inside that message. However, this data flow monitoring lacks some functionalities. There are no overall statistics, so if you are constantly failing for a type of message, you will not be able to easily spot that. There are no custom intervals or final resolutions than a day, so you cannot basically say that since last week, Thursday, 3 o'clock, or something like that. And there are no export options, so you cannot basically easily share that screen that you are seeing in the data flow monitoring with somebody else. To address all of this and more, there is the data processing report in Tableau, which is created to visualize and to make it interactive and to make it easily explorable, what you can already see in the data flow monitoring screen. In Tableau, you are able to quantify the delivered messages, how many was rejected, how many ended up in error, and so on. You will see that there are many different graphs that you can follow. You can create timelines, you can spot trends, and of course, all of this can be coupled with your own customizable view, your own filters that you can apply, and your own ideas of what you try to investigate or what you try to follow up. What is important in this data processing? There is a certain navigation path that I will show you. So there are multiple views inside that. And once you start from a big overview picture with just grand generous numbers, big overview numbers, and then you can drill down to a particular file or a particular issue and see that exactly how that is working. Also on this data processing report, you will be able to see some close to real-time flows that are updated every couple of minutes instead of the other reports which are only updated every couple of days. However, the general rule of thumb, which I already told, that the Tableau reports are not driven by the actual backend of the transparency platform, is true here as well, meaning that sometimes there can be lags until the report refreshes, or you might not be able to spot the exact data that you see on the backend of the transparency platform just right away. So I will not spend much more time on this presentation. I will instead go to the report and show you the report and the functionalities of the report more in detail. and walk you through the different aspects of it. Hide the black bars. Okay, so once you open up this report, it's in the same reports folder. It opens up the overview screen as well, the other reports. And on this overview screen, I have basically an overall quantification of status and two really simple filters. Two basic filters that will follow all along this report is what are the data providers that you are interested in looking at, and what are the time period that you are investigating. And once you selected your organization to be the data provider, you will see what are the number of total files that you sent during that period to the platform, how many of those files was processed successfully, and how many were rejected. You also see all of those values on a daily average, so spreading it down to averages over time. And you also see values inside those files. So sometimes you can back up a big number of values into a single file. Some data providers choose to send smaller files with lower number of values inside those files. So to quantify that period, we also try to show some metrics on the value basis, not just on the message basis. And down there you see a chart. On this chart, basically every bin is there are 5 bins, and it shows how many of the files, the total number of files, were processed in that interval of time. So what you can see here on my screen is that 88.92% were processed in less than 2 minutes by the platform. This processing is basically the time when it arrived to the platform, the message, until it's fully public and not public, but published, as we call it. So the processing of that file is done. And then there is also a really small percentage that is more than 15%. And what is interesting with this report is you no longer have those tabs up top that you used to have. Instead, you have a couple of navigation buttons on the top. Using those navigation buttons, you are able to look into the different functions of the report. So this was the overview page. On this overview page, you see the overall numbers. And this is what we send out every single week to you, filtered for the last week for that organization. But for example, you did some bulk submissions to the platform for some historical data, and you are interested in how that looks like from a timeline perspective. So looking back to how was yesterday, how was the day before, and trying to visualize all of that in a more graphical ways, was the second screen of this report, which is called the timeline. On this timeline, you can basically again set your data provider, set the submission, but in plus you can also set the data item description. So you can just say, okay, how is the timeline looking for the past for a particular data item. So for example, I'm setting all those load values, sometimes I get rejected, sometimes not. Is there a trend that I can spot? Is there maybe an increasing number of files that are rejected? Was there a day when something went wrong and all of my outages were rejected from the platform? An investigation like that can be done on this screen, where you can spot big spikes like that. And this leads me to the second point here, which is a Tableau feature, not particularly this report, that sometimes your graphs get distorted because of a couple of big values. So sometimes a spike on that graph is going to make that axis really big. So most of the values are really hard to analyze. And what you can do on all of those reports is you can exclude values.
Again?
You can click on the graph, you can select a single set of values visually, and you can see that, okay, I'm not interested on those. Let's see all the others. What your report is going to do, it is going to resize to show you just what you are interested in, just what you are there. So for example, if this spike is messing with me, I can click on it. And I basically need to hold it a little bit. And there will be two buttons appearing that say basically if it's, I will show it on another graph that is maybe easier to load for the platform. So how I navigate on this view is, as I showed you on the overview screen, you have a set of navigation buttons on the top. The first one which I showed you was the timeline. The second one is going to be the real-time view. What this real-time view is showing on the report is just the past 24 hours. This is a good way to visualize if you are doing work submissions, if you are doing something special for the day and you want to take a good eye on what is happening to the platform during that particular period of time. So all of these graphs are updated almost every minute. And what you can see here is always the latest and greatest data on what is processed, what is rejected. You can dial in your organization, you can dial in the styles that you are particularly interested in, and you can then see how many values, how many warnings, or how many processed files in less than 2 minutes, and what are the trends on that.
Excuse me. Is there a way to, on a specific view, to select the data provider, and then when you change it, the tab, let's say, to a timeline, to keep that provider? As I've seen, it resets the
this
filter.
particular report resets it, I think. It's a feature of the report to maintain those filters.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's not doing automatically, you have no way to do that, fortunately. But maybe we can speak with our developers if they can add that feature. Because yes, it would make sense to be able to know all the views.
For other reports, we have that feature. I remember when you select one of the data providers on the overview screen, and when you switch between tabs, it stays
in the same.
Yeah, it keeps your selection normally, but we can check.
Okay. Yeah, for this real time, it's basically a good view to look at if you really know that something is going on the platform in the past 24 hours, and then you want some more recent data. So that's a good way to look at it. And then the fourth option is basically what we are calling processing by data provider. What this processing by data provider does is a ranking of where your organization, from a simple messaging processing standpoint, compares to other organizations. And what you can see here is a list of data providers and the total number of files, how many files were processed in more than 7 minutes, how many files were rejected. And you can either see these as a percentage of the total files that organization is sending, or as absolute numbers. Some big organizations, of course, are sending much bigger number of files to us. That means that even if percentage-wise it's really a small number that is getting processed wrongly or getting rejected, as absolute number it's much higher. We will talk a little bit more about rankings and comparison between data providers in details coming up. but that's basically the view. And then we end up to why is something rejected. If it's processed and if it's green, that means that everything was okay with that file. That means that it's somewhat out of the interest to investigate further why is that file processing there. But of course, you are interested when files getting rejected, why that is happening. And what the rejections tab in this report tries to answer is just that. Why are those files rejected? What are the reasons behind? And how can I do something about it? What you see on the left side is a list of data items. Of course, now you can select a particular interval, you can select a particular data provider. And let's say you see that for this particular data item, there are rejected files, I don't know, 1,400, and these are generated something around 3,000 errors in those files. And here is a timeline of how that happens. So you can see that most of the days it works fine, but sometimes there are some oopsies there when that graph jumps. What you can see here on the top is the list of files which were rejected for that particular reason. So it's all dynamic. If I click on another reason, then the right side of my screen is refreshed automatically and showing now that for that particular data item, why are the rejection trends and what is rejected and when it was rejected. Taking those document IDs, you can go back either to your own system or to the data flow monitoring and look more into details. What was a particular XML file containing? What was the difference between that or the others? What were processed correctly? What you can see here on the left side is everything is grouped based on the data item, but sometimes I'm interested in seeing it based on the error message. So I can see that, for example, a lot of times this incorrect version you will see in the top, which is the reason for rejection, which really simply means that the platform has a higher version of the document that you are sending already processed. But what is important here is the same way of functionality. You click on something on the left, you see on the list on the right, and you can spot the trends. And this is a good example that there was a particular day when there were 800 messages rejected. So on my graph there is a big spike, which basically makes all the other values look really small. I cannot see basic trends on the other values. What I can do is I can exclude that value. All I have to do is hover over that value. It will pop up a little bit of details view on the right. And I can say either I want to keep only that value or I can exclude that value. If I click on the exclude, then my graph is basically going to resize for that bottom portion. And now I can make sense more in the lower values. I can also select multiple values by drawing an area to the chart. And then I can do the same thing, either keep only those or either exclude those. And the third button here is basically says that show me the data behind those points on the graph. This view in particular contains multiple elements, as you can see. So it's not just a simple graph, but there are graphs there, there is a graph here, there is a list there. So when I click on the download options and I'm downloading an image or a PDF, then I'm getting what I'm seeing on the screen. But when I try to download the cross tab or the data, then it suddenly becomes important. Where is my focus? Where was the last thing there I clicked somewhere? So if I click on the cross tab download, I will see that, okay, now I downloaded the graph that is down here because that was the last thing that I selected. And I can see that basically for every single day, how many had the recognition failed error. However, if I click here, for example, and I click download now, I will be able to get the list of files. The document IDs which had the recognition failed and not the number. So when you are trying to download something from export something from those reports, it's a good thing to first click on what you are looking at, make sure that that was your last click, and then you go for a download, go for an export, and then you will get that one.
If you make these exclusions, you just have to renew the page to get rid of
No,
those exclusions.
it's completely automatic. So if I, let's navigate back here. If I choose to exclude something, I just click on exclude. So for example, actual generation output per generated unit, rejections for the whole platform.
Yeah.
And I do not want to see the lower part of the graph. So I'm saying that I want to spot some trends here on the 200s. What I can do, I can select the whole lower section of the graph like that. Go for the exclude. And once I click that exclude, my graph becomes resized to the actual data that is showing. And then you are able to spot just that. If I'm interested just in this particular 3 days, I can then say keep only those 3 days. And then I'm zoomed in for that particular point.
But if you now want to see everything again,
Back to the original. Yeah.
You have this option here, either to undo, which is just one step back,
yeah.
or to revert, which is basically taking you back to the view that you started from.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome. Thanks.
I have a question. If I download the details for the processed file, I receive the number of files and the number of count more than 7 minutes, but not the rejected percentage of rejected. Although I click on the number of files, total number of files.
So your question is how you get the percentage of rejected files?
Yes.
In general or for a particular data item?
In general.
I'm checking this. Can you go backward to the description before? The one with the rejection by some data processing rejection.
Rejections, okay.
In the use of null station, null value. It doesn't mean. And if you go in the data item description, you have all the different data items. There was a rejection. The first one is null.
Yes. Why is that not?
The second one, if you filter by Terna, which would be data provider name Terna, would be the second would be null. What does it mean now?
Yes, so since these are files that are rejected by the platform, when you try to group those files based on the data item name, there are files that the platform couldn't make sense. So that means that when it started reading the message that arrived to the platform, it didn't even got to the point where it recognized that this is about that. So this is about an actual total number. This is about an aggregated generation per type. These are files, for example, which were corrupted midway. And if you could not recognize what is this data item this file is associated with, then it will show up in that null category.
Okay.
But in general speaking, for this Tableau, you will see null multiple times, and null simply means that there is no information for that particular column. So there is data, but how you need to imagine this report is there is a big table driving it behind. And from that table, we pick certain columns to display and certain columns, certain associations between other columns. But if in that column there are values which are not complete, then it will show up as null on the user interface of Tableau. Okay, let's get back to Wim's question about how you export the percentage of files which are rejected.
I retried and I solved.
Okay.
The secret is clicking on it multiple times before you.
Yeah, it's important that that's the focus. So that's the last thing that you interacted with before clicking the download. Okay. We have this report is really stuffy, as you see. There is multiple layers in it, and if you are an upper management or you are not that interested in the whole topic, you are probably not going to go through all of that. And for this, we have the KPIs page, which is basically management talk for how you are doing overall, and that's quantified. On this KPI page, you can see the evolution over months of rejected values and basically what are the data items that are getting rejected. You can filter for just, you can see this either per data item description or per error message, which basically means that on the left side screen on this table, you can either see every error message and how many are affected by that particular message, or you can see every data item name there. You can see how many data items are affected by that. I seem to remember that we also send these KPI pages in those emails out, but this is generally a really high level overview of evolutions and trends inside the rejections domain. You have no options to drill down into those values directly from there, but then you have to investigate through the rejection screen how to do it. And then the last option for this report is what we are calling a live visualization for the past 4 days of the transparency platform incoming messages. Every single point on this graph is a message that has been sent to the transparency platform. If the point is higher on the graph, that means that it took for the platform longer to process it. If the point is bigger, if the bubble is bigger, that means it's a bigger file, so it's quantified based on the file. But we can see that there are a couple of outliers, so there are a couple of files which were processed for a really long time. So what I usually do on this graph, you can basically filter those out. The ways I showed you, just exclude them. Then the graph is basically going to show more meaningful information. But on this bubble graph, it's easy to spot this, for example, if the platform has problems, if there are delays in processing, if there are delays, for example, in processing, that means that the file is received and it's not processed right away. So this zero axis, basically the bubbles, all of them become detached from the zero axis, and there becomes like a bump in this graph. If there are many rejections for a given period, if you are much smaller amount of files sent for a given period. What this graph is also capable of is, I'm filtering it down to just a single pass date, so it's a little bit more faster when I navigate it. But what it's capable of, it can color this graph, not just based on if it's rejected or if it's processed, but also based on the data provider name. So you can see that maybe spot different trends, which are the providers who are getting processed faster and who are getting processed much slower. And you can indirectly influence how fast your files are getting processed by the platform by formatting them and optimizing them to the platform. So making sure that you package it in the right, most optimal way for the platform to be interpreted. We are looking at this graph a lot, so I can actually go more into the details of why certain symptoms and how to spot it, but this is just an overview. The best for this, how was the processing of the platform? So if you want to do some interesting stuff and you want to look back to the days of how that was processed by the platform and how all of your files were eaten up, then that's a good way to look into it and spot outliers or spot different trends. So spot files that were processed for a really long time, or spot files that were rejected for a particular reason. These are the main functions of this data processing report. If you have questions, then I think now I can go into more details.
What does mean null in the processing of files? Null. The main rejection. You can reject null.
So you are talking about the rejection screen that there is a category that is going on. I actually tried to answer that question a bit earlier, but the null value means that the data item for that particular file could not be recognized, the data item tag. So he sent us an XML, we registered that he sent us something, but the platform wasn't able to recognize what this file is about.
Okay.
For information, just the identification of data item, that's one of the last steps in processing. And usually, if there is a problem with this schema, or if there is a problem with the file, and file is rejected before it arrives to recognition of data item. So if it is rejected before that step, then it remains as a null.
It's something in the XSD that's not
If
working.
it is XSD, if it is, for example, empty file,
Oh, empty.
there are such cases also. If, for example, there are wrong codes and they're not matching to any data item,
Right.
then this data item cannot be recognized. But if data item is recognized and if it is rejected at the next stage, then you can see data item.
You can still see the files, but it's not matched with the data item.
Yeah, so if you click on the mouse, you can still be able to see the files and then get the list of files and then treat it as any other error. But yeah, and look into what happened here.
I found an example of this null with a file with the error in the data process monitor. Higher or same version of the document has already been processed. So in this case, it should be clear which data item is affected.
No,
So it's just how we do it in order. And one of the first things we check is the ID of the document and the version of it. And if it fails on that step, so we say that the higher version of this particular document we already have, then we don't even look at the rest of it. So we say that, okay, we failed it, we don't go into recognition of the data item monitoring. So it actually doesn't go through the chain until we get it recognized, until we recognize the data item. It's just a design of the platform.
Yeah. It's a really the best solution to show it like that because it makes it difficult to find which data flow is affected. That is where we have the problem with send. It seems that we send higher versions and then we send lower versions.
I agree that it might be helpful to have that information. It's just that how it's set up currently, the platform, that it starts to validate it, and if it fails before it actually gets to the step of the recognition, then it will not log what is the file and it bounces it back. We had a small outage on the platform, so maybe I can try to show that in this value count versus processing time graph.
Sure. From a different account or just trying to log in account find just the particular account or it's time to click in to log in to hit. So we can log in, but it's not a particular account.
So what you can see on this graph is zoomed into around this time frame here, which was a small outage of the platform, and what you can see there is that all those bubbles are stopped for a while, and then maybe there is a bump just after that. So there was an outage which lasted probably less than 10 minutes, but still you can spot these types of things easily on this graph. You can see it immediately that there is something fishy going on. This was, for example, a new release deployment. Any other questions related to this data processing and all of that?
One general comment about the time selection. In this data processing, or in this report, you can select last 4 days. I think it would be nice to have some similar shortcuts for some of the other reports too. So you could select last month or last week, because in the data completed report there was no such possibility.
Yes, so this is a relative chart because it actually contains so many data with value count that you cannot store more than 4 days in the database that is driving that report. But what is important and why we do not do that, so you have the last day or the last week, is because the last week includes basically the last day. And the last day is not containing completely correct information because of the update schedules of the report. So what you should always try to do is look, for example, the best complete week, which would be, from last Sunday until the Sunday before that. Or always a period that does not include today, does not include the last day, because there can be some data that is not completely accurate and not completely up to date yet because of that for the rest of the reports. However, for this data processing, if there is data that is correct, so it's not like the completeness, it does not depend on it. This is why we have here these relative dates for the past couple of 4 days, for the last 3 days.
Yeah, what I meant was that there is some default time which is actually quite long, was at least for the data completeness report. And then you need to adjust that by choosing just days. It could be previous month, it could be previous week, but
I agree that it's sometimes the default view is not really well good for you. You need to do multiple steps until you get to something that you are interested in. For this, I would recommend that you create a view that you are interested in with all your data provider filter, your time slots, and so on. And once you have that, save that view as a private view for yourself and set it as a default. What that will enable you to do is the next time you open up the report, it actually opens up into that view. So you will continue from where you left off. You will continue always with those filters already set, which will aid you to get to the results faster. But yes, I agree that maybe we can also improve what the default value is that we are showing on relevantly large intervals and so on. So there can be changes on that as well on our side.
Is it possible to, when you make a view, can you define a relative time data for the view?
No, unfortunately. So you need a specific time slots.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I will open up for a quick second here the transparency platform's backend, just as a really quick refreshment on how this data flow monitoring looks like. So here you see all those files and what is processed, and each file basically has timestamps and data providers and channels and so on. And whatever we discussed here on this report, on the data processing report, is basically just the fields that are readily visible right at this moment. So when it was processed, what are the data items and things like that. However, you have this data flow log, which is a lot more information about how the processing went down for that particular file. And on this data processing log, sometimes you have messages which are called warning messages. These warning messages are a little bit hidden on the platform, to be honest, because you have to dig down here and then you have to go back to those warning messages. And these warning messages are what the next report, the warnings report, is trying to surface a little bit and trying to focus on a little bit more. So I think I have also some slides that I would like to present. Again, there is a laboratory. If you want, you can do that. It basically a step-by-step process to navigate the report and do some exports on your own. Once you've done that export, there is a step which asks you to send this directly to me. No need to do that. But if you are interested, that might be helpful for you to get your get you started on it. Okay, so if there are no more questions related to the rejections and this data processing overview, then I think I will continue with the warnings report. And this warnings report is the third report for today. What is based on is still based on the data flow monitoring of the transparency platform. So it's still based on the screen that I just showed you, where every message is logged and how it's processed is then logged in more details, and then you can get to the details and see exactly the messages that happened and why those happen. However, when you look at this data from monitoring, you will have, and you're interested, for example, which are the outages that are published and receive the warning message that those outages overlapping with something else, you will have a really hard time finding that, because you first need to filter out and find those messages, and inside those messages you will have to go one by one and search for the details and the exact warning messages for that particular file, and then you will need to somehow aggregate that. So spotting general trends for warnings is was currently a not really easy task to do on the current backend. Filtering options of this, of course, were the same as for the data flow monitoring, and of course you didn't have any export options. So there is no direct way to send a list of files that had warnings back to someone or to cascade it back. And all of these are addressed by the warnings report. So what it does, it visualizes the data that is created by the data flow monitoring, and especially focuses on the files that received at least one warning message during processing. If the files didn't receive any warning message, then it will completely miss from this particular report. It will show up on the other report, that was the data processing report, but this warning report is only focused on files that have warnings and spotting trends among those. What it can do, it can, of course, for any data provider, for any given interval, so you have a lot of filters and ways you can customize your own view, and it will provide you an overview of what are the warnings that happened for you, how often those happen, and you can dig down into a single file level and spot for that particular file what were the problems. And this will aid your investigation if you ever wish to look into why those warnings happen. There are multiple pages to this report which I'm going to walk through, and multiple functionalities on how to use multiple use cases. And this is what I'm going to do next. So it's a really familiar look. if you look at the first big numbers on the top. However, what is really important here to understand is that the files that don't have any warnings in them are simply not counted here. So the total number of files is 500,000. The reason it's not 30 million or so what was for the other report is because these are only the files that have at least one warning message in them. And out of those files, the first label shows how many got processed, the second label shows how many got rejected, how many had errors. We also show daily metrics, so metrics that you can compare between two completely independent intervals, so for example, last year versus last week. And we also show you a general graph about how this went down, so timeline of warnings. On this first year, the only filter that you can put is basically become a data provider. The way warnings are implemented, there are particular data items which are more prone to warnings, which are generating a lot of the warnings. There are data items which are not generating warnings at all, the simpler ones. So some data providers will be more interested in using this report than others. It's completely possible that your organization didn't receive warnings at all for a given period of time if you are not supplying data for data items that have particular effect for warning. So what are warning messages that are usual are, for example, overlapping outages or generation values reported which are higher than the installed capacity that is reported to us and so on. So, yeah.
The ones correlated to the quality checks and the understanding.
Yeah, yes. So most warnings are connected to data quality or data quality issues. Okay, this report as well as the others have the same navigating options. So you have the buttons on top to navigate down to other views of the report. And the second view that is after the overview is what we are calling warnings by data provider, which is a really familiar comparison. So it's what we saw on the other side with the rejection comparisons. But here we can see sort based on either the total number of files, either the percentage, or either the files that contain warnings, how well each of those organizations is doing, which are the numbers that they are producing. What you will see is exactly what I said, that there are a couple of organizations to the bottom of this list which almost completely don't generate warnings, and there are a couple of ones which are generating more warnings than others. This is just for general guidance. You can look into how you are doing compared to others, but if you receive any warning, it's already a bad thing. So based on that ranking, it does not mean that you do not need to look into that particular warning if you are in the middle of that list. The third screen of this report is what we are calling the warnings. Now this warnings is really similarly functionality to the rejections report, to the data processing report. You have the possible list of messages, for example, early submission. This is a very typical warning where you, for example, reporting load values before the end of the operating period or generating values exactly the same before the actual generation happened. And what you get is you get a warning which basically says that we are too early with that. And once you click that, you can look into the trend, you can look into the number of files, and in particular interest for this, you can actually look into the warning message. And once you click on that, so you click on a single file on the right, you get to a view which contains the warning messages for that particular file, and you see that data sent before gate opening, this is when it was sent, this is when the date, this is what's the time slot when you were actually expecting the data from you. These messages are especially important for this invalid outage warning, which basically means that you already have an outage for that resource for the given period that you defined for the outage, overlapping with what you are currently reporting. And this is a particularly hard thing to find on your own, but even for the platform, to find outages that are overlapping with the one we are reporting. So what this message is actually giving you is giving you the conflicting outages. What is the outage in conflict with for what period? So it does a little bit of validation on the platform, and it gives you exactly that. The reason you are not good with that outage is because you already have that particular outage. Yeah.
It's possible to see the all connected file, I mean the all file of the same period, overlapping file, because it would be interesting to see exactly the idea of the file which are for the same period, for the same, to follow the reason of this overlap. Because we can see the idea of the file.
I'm not sure I understand. So you see the idea of the file and you would like to follow.
To identify all the idea of the file which overlap the same period. For example, it could be 2 or 5 then. How to find all this file for particular period.
So you can filter based on the period when the file was sent to us, but not on the period that the actual data inside the file refers to. It's not possible on this. So you can see that I would like to see the files from last week, but not, for example, the outages for August or something like that. What is here you see a metric which is called unit document ID. Sometimes the same wording is generated over multiple versions of the same data. So, for example, you are sending generation values, and then you're sending a higher version of the same data, and again a higher version. Each of them are getting the same wordings. If you are good at responding to that wording, so for example, it means that the first time your message got a warning, the second time you are sending it, then the warning is not going to be there. What this unit document ID tries to quantify is exactly that, how many of those on the list are unique, how many are just reported once, as far as they got actually the warning just once. What you can see on the left is the reasons for the warning, but we can also see it based on the data item description. So you can also see that I want the files which are, for example, for outages or actual total load, for example. And then these are the actual total load files which are generating warnings. And if I want to look into one of those, then I can say that they send the load values before actually the gate opening. In this case, for load, the gate opening is actually the end of the operating period, so that means that you send the load for the hour before the end of the hour, for example. And then the last tab of this report is the KPIs. On this KPI tab, we try to do the same as we did for the rejections report. That is that try to show overall numbers and evolutions and trends. So if you are not really interested in the daily problematics of reporting to the transparency platform, but you are just interested in how my team is doing, then this is the report to look at. You can see here how many are rejected and how many are processed and how many actually have warnings. And all of this is an evolution on a per monthly basis. You can see based on either the number of files that are contain warnings or the number of warnings inside those files, because these two numbers can be really different. A file can contain multiple warnings. And then you can of course group it either by warning message, or you can group it based on data item description. This page is also really good if you want to report some of the these numbers back to your organization, and you are just looking for overall numbers or the evolution of trends. There is of course this generated for every year. However, data on these reports on all the warnings and all the data completeness is around just the past 2 years. So you will not be able to see these calculate these KPI numbers for longer periods of time. This is simply a technical limitation of the backend of the report, of the data driving these reports, that we try to make them, try to find an optimal between the performance of the report and between the data that is actually useful, and it still has to make some sense to present it and visualize it. Okay, are there any questions related to warnings? Good. Then we have one more report and then lunch. So we are progressing well, I think. Our next report is a really simple one, and it's basically what we realized while building this data of this warnings report and data processing report is that some people are really just interested in seeing a ranking, seeing of who are the best performers, who are the worst performers. And this particular report exactly does that. So for example, you can pick a month, let's say February 2018, and look at who were the top persons in terms of rejections and who were the bottom 10%, 10 data provider in terms of rejections, and how many of their files got rejected. We calculate this for every single month of the year, which is the top 10, which is the bottom 10. But if you click on one data provider in particular, then you can see the overall trend, how he fluctuates over the month. Some data providers are steadily good or steadily worse. Others are basically shifting every single month based on how good or bad their month is. The same ranking is available also for the warnings, how many percentage of files you receive with warnings, or how many percentage of files was rejected. So there are two views for that. This is just an overall ranking on how you do in the two previous reports, the warning report and the processing report. This third report is just that, so it's a really short one. We still have some time until lunch. So what I would actually prefer to do is show you some more advanced things what you can do with these reports until then. But if you have questions, then I much better answer to your questions and do that. So our data management team actually did some maintenance on the Tableau server, and now it should be solved. That's errors that we got in the morning. If you still experience some, please let me know. Otherwise, what we could do is go through the laboratories that I prepared and try to do that together.
If I can ask you a question.
you were talking about warnings, it was under transparency platform. And do you intend to integrate these functionalities of warning messages into Tableau in order to work with only one application when I want to see how data were processed and statistical uh, numbers about warnings? Because I have to work with two applications now when I want to see warnings and when I want to see rejected data.
So your question is, I'm not sure if I understand correctly, if the two reports, the one that's showing rejections and the one that's showing warnings, are ever going to be merged together?
Now the question is if the functionalities concerning the warnings will be integrated into Tableau application. Because when you showed us pictures of warnings, you worked under transparency portal. And all this day we are working with a Tableau application and it's different environment.
Yeah, sorry, I'm sorry for that was a confusing, but I just try to show what is also on the transparency platform, but you can also find that in the warnings report. I can maybe reiterate that a little bit of how to find warnings for a particular file. So it's actually redundant in that sense that you can either use the transparency platform, either the Tableau report. What I try to do is refer back a little bit to the platform because maybe that is more familiar to some of you.
Sure, that's the same source.
And it's of course the same source. So on this warnings tab of the warnings report, once you select a particular reason for the warning, so for example, I want to see the files that had that were submitted too early. What I get is I get a list of files that were submitted too early. Inside those files, if I click on any name here, so for example, I'm interested in this file, the third one on my list, I can see the details of the warning. These details of the warning is the same of what I would see if I click on the details on the transparency platform backend for that particular file. What this Tableau report aids you to do is to find a file that actually had warnings and to be able to see the overall trends in that particular warnings. But once you get down to the file level, the information is exactly the same, what you see here and what you see on the transparency platform. You see the description of the warning, the generated text when that warning was created. So for example, in this case, when does the files delivered and when it should have been, what was the gate opening for that file. For example, another really popular thing is that force outage started before the outage itself, which means that you are basically saying that in the future you have a force outage. Or things like that, and then you can say, look into the detail of every particular file, but you can also look into just for a given period of time, which were the files that had that particular problem. Okay, how do I get a list of files that have a particular problem? That would be a really easy use case. So I'd say that I know that some of my files which I'm sending for actual generation output per generating unit get warnings because my generation value is higher than what my install capacity is. So basically I'm reporting on one end that this is how much I can squeeze out from the generator, but I'm actually reporting that it generated more than that. What I would do, the first thing is that I select that I'm only interested in the data item description, only in actual generation output per generating unit. Then it says that I have 8,000 files which have these problems. And if I look into those files, I can see that, for example, install capacities are 0. I click on the header of this table, download it as a cross tab. So basically that means that I download it as an Excel sheet. I can now open up this in Excel and look into more details about it. Look at document IDs and so on. There were 2 days here you can spot, which had a lot more warnings than the other days. So how can I filter down for those, for example? If I hover over, then it says to me that it's October 3rd, 2018. What I do, I dial in here for the period October 3rd, 2018. And then I'm seeing only the files which were processed during that day. What I can see here is that most of them are from a single data provider, and it's most probably a historical update that went back for years, and there was a set of files sent in input submission mode, so basically all at once, and this is why I have for that particular day a lot more warnings for others. Let's talk a little bit about alerts. So you basically Tableau has a function where you can define for a given graph if you want to receive notifications if that graph passes a certain threshold. And to do that, you can click on this alert button on top. But first you need to have a clean view. So for example, I create a view here. I choose a data provider and save this view as my view for that data provider. On this view, whenever I navigate back to it, then I will already have the data provider dialed in. I will already have the submission date dialed in. What I can do here, I can click on the alert button. So I have to switch to the new view. It says select numerical axis of the chart, so for example this one. And then I can see that whenever this number is above or equal to, for example, let's say 400 messages, I want to receive an alert. I can put here as many people as I would like to, who as well would like to receive an alert, and I can set how often do I want to get this alert if that condition is true. So I can set that at most I want to be alerted daily, or weekly, or hourly, or every single time that the threshold is passed. Once you have created this alert, if this next time is going to be true, you will receive a notification up here with that particular scenario describing that, hey, look, your alert just triggered.
Do we get prizes for being in the top 10 worst for I don't know, over 10 times a month or something like that? I'm joking, obviously, but it is quite revealing. This report, you know, the warnings report, the worst and best.
Yes, so it's not just that we quantify that if you are for that particular month on the top or the best, there is the second column which says number of times you've been on this list.
Yeah, exactly.
So
That's
if that one is as well high, then we should maybe do something about it.
maybe.
Okay.
Anything you want to cover?
Let's really see if there is lunch.
Yeah, I checked that's really so we can.
Okay, if there are there any other questions? If there are no other questions, then I suggest that we go for lunch until 1:30. And then we go for the TP incidents report and the gate closure and gate completeness. Then a little bit of pre-session and Alexander presentations. It's on the sixth floor here.
Yeah, it's just here on the sixth floor. If you just when you leave the room, just take a right. There's a hall there.